Let's go ahead and finalize our unit circle. What we need to do now is determine the coordinates of all of these points that go around our unit circle. Now remember, think of this is on a coordinate plane. Okay, we have quadrant 1 up here, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and over here is quadrant 4. Okay, and now the unit circle, remember that word unit means 1, so we have a radius of 1. So let's just start talking about quadrant 1. Now if my radius is 1, that's this length. Now think of this on a coordinate plane. That means your x value is 1 and your y value is 0. And now remember too what we learned in previous videos and lessons is cosine of theta relates to x and your sine of theta relates to y. If we come up over here, let's do the other quadrantal angle, 90 degrees. So this is right on the y-axis, which means my x is 0 and my y is 1. So cosine of 90 degrees is 0, sine of 90 degrees is 1. Now let's go fill in. Now these are these reference angles that I've been talking about. As long as you know quadrant 1, you're going to be good to go on anything else on the unit circle. Now back in example 3, you guys actually calculated out the coordinates of 60 degrees, 45 degrees, this one was your try it, and the 30 degrees. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Let's start out with 60 degrees. We concluded that the x measurement here, the bottom measurement of our right triangle was 1/2, and then the height was square root 3 over 2. So that means this point here is 1/2 square root 3 over 2. Okay. Now, so this is what we did in example 3. Here's a little triangle. We have a 60-degree measurement. This distance here is 1/2, which again, your cosine, it relates to your x, and your height, square root 3 over 2. Notice here in quadrant 1, x values are positive, y values are positive. And now what I've been teaching you guys with using reference angles, here's where it's going to make things nice and easy. So imagine you just do a reflection over the y-axis and you flip that triangle over. Okay, so here's your 60-degree angle. Well, you know what? Your x is still 1/2 and your y is still square root 3 over 2. However, if I'm in quadrant 2, my x values to the left of the origin have to be negative. So that means this is a negative 1/2, but your y values are still positive. So the coordinates of this point here on my angle 2 pi over 3 is negative 1/2 and square root 3 over 2. This is cosine, so cosine of 2 pi over 3 equals negative 1/2, and sine of 2 pi over 3 equals square root 3 over 2. Now let's go down to quadrant 3, and again, if we do a reflection, all my writing is going to be upside down, but I think you'll get the picture. Your x is still 1/2. This is your cosine. 1/2. Your distance is square root 3 over 2. So here we go, down here, 1/2 square root 3 over 2. Now, however, if we're in quadrant 3, again, we are to the left of the origin, which means these are negative values. And if we're underneath the x-axis, well, my y values are also negative. So again, cosine of 4 pi over 3 equals negative 1/2, And the sine of 4 pi over 3 equals negative square root 3 over 2. Now likewise, I'm not even going to bother flipping that triangle over again. Take a look over here. We're still going to have 1/2 and square root 3 over 2. But now in quadrant 4, my x values are positive, but my y values are still under the x-axis, so they are negative. This is where reference angles, coming up next week in 7.3, you're going to be having to evaluate functions using sine and cosine. If you know your reference angles and you just have these memorized, you're going to be good to go. So let's go ahead and tackle, let's do 45 degrees or pi over 4. We concluded that your x value is square root 2 over 2. Your y value is also square root 2 over 2. Pi over 4 is a nice easy one to remember. Square root 2 over 2, square root 2 over 2. Okay, so now let's fill it in over here. Again, we're doing that reflection. So your value is still going to be square root 2 over 2. Square root 2 over 2, except for a change in your signs. So if I am again left of the origin, my x values are negative, my y values will be positive. Let's go down to quadrant 3. Square root 2 over 2. There we are. In quadrant 3, x is negative, your y is also negative. And again, let me just reiterate, the cosine of 5 pi over 4 equals negative square root 2 over 2. The sine of 5 pi over 4 also equals negative square root 2 over 2. Moving on over to quadrant 4. Let's jot it down. Square root 2 over 2, square root 2 over 2. Now let's analyze these signs. So I am again in quadrant 4. My x values are to the right of the origin. X's are positive. Y's, however, are underneath the x-axis. They are negative. Let's go ahead and we got to do 30 degrees and we got to finish up our quadrantals. So 30 degrees. We determined here x is square root 3 over 2, that's my cosine, and the y is 1/2, that is my sine. So square root 3 over 2 and 1/2. And of course they are both positive in quadrant 1. Let's move them into quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, your x value is negative, your y is positive. Quadrant 3. Quadrant 3, both are negative. Quadrant 4, square root 3 over 2 and 1/2. It is just your y value that is negative. Now let's quickly do this other. We missed 2 of these quadrantal angles. And again, at pi, we have a distance. My x value is -1, 0. So in other words, the cosine of pi is -1. The sine of pi is 0. Coming down here, my x value is 0. My y value, -1.